Hello, this is Robert Perez, and today I'm going to be talking about the scientific method. At the beginning of the year, we did the scientific method, part of the beginning of the school year. Scientific method, along with learning how to use the periodic table, science safety rules, and the scientific tools that we use in the classroom. So safety tools, scientific process, and using the periodic table. Those are the first things that we learned right off the bat. So I guess it started at the beginning, and they don't take that long. We're doing a 30-minute stint here. I thought it was recording earlier, but it didn't. So I kind of went through the entire thing from my normal period to now, and I went back to look at YouTube to see what was recorded, and it didn't record. So I'm going to do the lab, lab again, just to make sure it's working. Okay. So welcome, and I hope everybody's staying safe. I'm going to be talking about scientific process in detail, and we'll start off by the different posters that are out there. Now, in my classroom, I explain to the students, so that if parents are watching or anybody else is watching that decides to watch, these posters are a little quirky. So let me go and show you with the window capture. I did a Google search, and with Google search, I have tons of different. I just did the scientific method in the search, and I went and I see that scientific method for kids, and I've got very fancy ones. Some are their own artwork, but a lot of the teachers have put a lot of thought into the scientific process. And if you notice something though, I go to something like this. It's the scientific method, and it has ask a question, observe and wonder about the scientific topic, make a hypothesis, an educated guess, answer your question, conduct experiments, follow steps to test your hypothesis, collect data, record your observations and the outcomes of your experiment, analyze information, reflect on the results, and then report the results. Communicate your results by report, graph, or presentation. This is one that someone's put a lot of thought into, made a professional version of it, and has sold these to classrooms all over the world. And there's others that are like it. I mean, you can make your own poster also, but here's what I'm noticing on them. This is a separate poster, the scientific method, and it starts with a purpose. The other one started with ask a question. And purpose, what do I want to learn? There's a question in there. So I'm wondering if they're trying to use these words interchangeably, which is always a bad idea. Words are made for a specific reason. They will tell you something. There's a definition to those words. The word purpose and question are two different things. So they're starting out with a purpose on this one: research, hypothesis, experiment, analysis, and conclusion. Conclusion is not in this one over here, but reporting results and analyzing information, you could make a conclusion from those two. Your analysis, well, I think analysis is both of them. Yeah, analyzing information. And here's yet another poster. The scientific method having 6 steps. Question. Again, they start with a question. This one asks a question. This one says purpose. So hypothesis, experiment, data, analyze, and report. Same thing with this one on the report and analyze. Experiment. Okay. And hypothesis. So a more often common thing here is question and hypothesis. But research has its place in there. Here's another poster. They did the purpose also. So there's 2 posters that have purpose and 2 posters that start with a question. So which one's right? In a way, they are all technically right. The whole point of the scientific process or method is to give scientists a list of logical steps on how they're going to develop a theory or develop the laws of, the specifics of the law of nature or something like that. They want to make sure that there's a logical sequence of events that happens when you're observing the natural world to make some kind of law or theory or something that is measurable and testable, so that other scientists, when they do this or they see your work, they're like, well, in this experiment this person did, they said that all rocks fall to the ground. So in our experiment, all rocks better fall to the ground, or their scientific process wasn't correct. Their theory is incorrect, and it shouldn't be incorrect if they use the scientific process, because then every scientist in the world should be able to recreate the experiment. So, going back to the posters, which one's right? Well, I don't think there is one that's technically right or wrong. There's a list of logical sequence of steps that they're following, so they can develop their theory about whatever topic they're considering. So when you do the searching in Google, though, I also did this. I went to settings, I went to advanced search, so I could find the biggest posters. Instead of any size, you don't want any size, you want large, because you want to be able to see it right. And what if you're going to try to print something like this out? Always observe the copyright laws. I gotta say that because I'm on YouTube and they are real big about copyright laws. I'm not going to use this for anything other than educational purposes, just to show you and explain the scientific process list. Okay, I have my own list of the scientific process, and I was trying to find one earlier, but I didn't find it before I started the video. There it is. This is a chart, and it's in really poor quality, but I'm going to open it in a new tab and show you. There's only real 5 steps in this one. Ask a question or make an observation. Write a hypothesis, make predictions. The predictions is I always thought the hypothesis was technically a prediction. Hypothesis is an educated guess, but that guess can be considered a prediction. I predict, I feel, I believe, I think that this will happen in my experiment. So the make a prediction and write a hypothesis, those are kind of the same in my opinion. And this poster really has only 4 steps. This is state your conclusion, perform your tests or experiments. But you perform your tests or experiments, but it doesn't really say anything about the data. You're going to collect the data when you do the experiment. So maybe they lumped it in with that one. In high school, I've seen, I went to a vertical team meeting in one of the other districts I worked in. And we went from 1st grade all the way up to 12th grade science teachers in the same room. And we had a discussion about what were the steps of the scientific process. At the high school level, they can have up to 15 or 18 steps in the scientific process, because there are specific things that they want to do in labs, of protocols they have to follow so that their experiment can be done and the data can be taken, and you can make the hypothesis more viable and the data that comes from it more specific to the variable that they used. You don't want to have a lot of variables in the experiment. So what do I explain with the kids in junior high? Well, in junior high, we kind of agreed on a certain number of steps at this vertical team meeting, and we have about 7. And I'm going to go over those 7 steps. Because the farther you go in school, the more steps you're going to have. Even at the collegiate level, you have a certain set of protocols. But at the elementary level, because they're just starting to be thinking like science teachers, even though I believe everybody thinks like a science person, a scientist, they are using the 7 steps, and you don't even know you're using the 7 steps. That's why it's a logical sequence of things you're going to do. So the elementary will only have 3 or 4. They make an observation, they make a hypothesis. We have to teach them hypothesis early so that by the time they're in high school, it's old hat. Then conclusions. You have to make a conclusion. You have to make a nice, neat, concise, to the point explanation of what happened in the experiment, but you can't take more than a paragraph. So here's how I technically explain it to the students. Okay, I have a list of 7 steps. And the scientific process, I tried to logically think of how it would be the scientific process and how everybody would actually use it in their ordinary daily lives. You do it all the time. You'll be surprised at how you do. So here are the steps of the scientific process. I start with observation. Observation is done with your 5 senses. You see, hear, smell, taste, or touch whatever it is that you're observing. And scientists in antiquity, in ancient times, scientists were not really called scientists, they were philosophers, And they did all kinds of things. They were doing math, they were doing science, they were doing social studies, they were doing ethics, they were finding ways to explain their world. And these guys got basically taken care of by kings, queens, nobles, royalty. They were taken care of so they could continue thinking all day long and not really have a job. In those days, you had to go out and hunt or fish to eat. It's kind of like now, I don't know, these times are getting crazy, but knowing how to fish and hunt is a good thing, because if you ever had to take care of your family and yourself, you would have to know these things. But these philosophers, they probably weren't very good hunters, and they probably weren't very good. They were thinkers. And so they were taken care of so they could continue thinking. And so very often a philosopher was also a mathematician and a scientist. He was also a doctor. He was also a speaker, public speaker. Very broad, generalized kind of life the guy had, and he didn't have to hunt. He just had to keep thinking. So observation, 5 senses. In all those days, all they did was sit around and observe things, and they drew conclusions from what they observed. But that's only 2 of the 7 steps. Then they're like, well, okay, if you're making an observation, let's do this real time. I was giving this story, there's 3 stories, but I'll only do 2 of them. The first story is me and a colleague, this colleague and I are sitting there on elementary playground duty. We're sitting there, they're getting ready to go back in after being on the playground for a while. And my colleague and I are talking to each other. And we're on the playground, and she's looking in this direction, and I'm looking in this direction, and from that we can see the entire playground. We're not really that close to each other, so we're not in like a deep, serious conversation, because we are paying attention to the kids. But we're kind of talking to each other. I don't know what's the weather going to be like. I'd rather be playing golf, blah, blah, blah. But then I see a look of horror on her face, and then I hear this. I hear a smack, a thud on the ground. And that's observation 101 right there. My first instinct was, it's observation. I'm like, whoa, I just heard something. And I know she saw something. There's my observation. It automatically made a question pop up in my head. What the heck was that? Because I heard this noise. My brain automatically started to go through its mental Rolodex of all that stuff, this mental database here of all the sounds that were similar to what I just heard. And in my experience playing football, I know what it's like when someone gets knocked to the ground. I hear this kind of dull thud on the ground, and I know from that experience that somebody's body hit the ground. A little body. So I've done the observation, the question, and the research. And research, in my opinion, is more, it's used wrong here. Research, to me, is when you're contributing knowledge, data, or experience to a certain topic or field because of your experimentation. You're doing these experiments, you're testing hypotheses over and over again so that you can contribute this information to the field. That's research. Whether you do a survey or you actually go out into the field or you're in the laboratory, you're doing these things to make that theory stronger, or to, like I said, add information to the scientific field on that topic. That's research. That's what I understand research really is. This stuff they're asking to do in this this checklist of scientific things is more of a literature review. It's not research. A literature review is when you look something up. That's why it's called a literature review. You're reviewing the literature. Now, when you do this research, I'll keep calling it research just for the sake of, not messing anybody else up. But the research you're doing, which is actual literature review, you do it in several ways to find information about your topic, especially if it's a topic that nobody else has done very much at all. There's very little research in this area, so you would be contributing to that. That's why you do experiments. You're doing this so that you can add to that. So if you're going to be a doctor or scientist or somebody else in a scientific field, and you have to come up with something, you look for something that not very many people have done. And so you start doing your experiments based on their other scientists' observations and questions that they brought up. So you can start doing your experiments based on that and adding to the field. That's what you would do as a scientist. So the research literature review, it's not just literature you're reviewing. You could also ask an expert. You can bring somebody from around here, SpaceX is popping up, and you could ask an expert on astrophysics to come from SpaceX to explain things to your class, and that would be cool. That's also asking an expert is the literature review, reading up on books. Very few people read books anymore these days, but books do have information that sometimes doesn't change. And then, so you've got literature review. You can review the books that are around. You can ask an expert to come in and talk to you. You can also use the internet. You go on the web, do a search, try to find out everything you can. And then libraries. You've got libraries at different college campuses that are accessible online, so that you can ask them for their catalog, and go through the catalog and see if you can find information that's already in the library on this. So that's your literature, that's your research. Observations of five senses, question. Research is a literature review, asking an expert, going to a library, reading books. Hypothesis is next. Now, hypothesis is an educated guess because you have asked a question and you've tried to find as much information as you can to answer that question. This is why your hypothesis is an educated guess. It's not just a random guess, because you've already looked up information as much as you could find, and you've already figured out what question you want to answer to look up that stuff. So without the question and the research part, your hypothesis is not very much of an educated guess. So all four of these things depend on each other, and they happen immediately. Going back to my story, we're talking, I see her face make, she's like, and I hear thud. The question in my head was, what was that? My mental Rolodex starts going around in circles and says, okay, it sounds like someone hit the floor. So that's my hypothesis. I think someone just fell. So my experiment, to turn around and test my hypothesis, I look around to find out what's going on, and I see a kid on the ground on his back going, and he can't really breathe, so it's just more like a croaking noise. And it's hilarious. Not that I don't think it's hilarious that he got hurt, but what dad, I'm a dad, what dad hasn't sit there and gone, did something dumb, didn't you? Yeah, I know it. So I didn't laugh at the time because I thought it was serious. I was like, oh no, somebody got hurt. The last thing somebody that's on playground duty wants to hear is someone getting hurt. So he's laying there and he's like, ugh. And I remember what my coaches did when I was in football. They get you by your belt and they try to pick you up and down and try to get some air flowing into your lungs so that you can get your breath again and you get your wind knocked out of you. So I'm doing that and I'm asking him questions, collecting my data. Okay, are you okay? And the kid kind of goes, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna move you around. Is anything broken? He's like, and so I was like, are you going to do that again? And I had to ask because I was, I went into dad mode after that. I was like, you did something dumb, kid. Come on. And I knew what he did. What he did was we're talking and looking in different directions. That's why she was able to see what happened, but she didn't see it until the last second. Why? Because it's impossible to be everywhere in the playground at once, even if you're walking around. And we had been walking around. So what she saw at the moment that this happened was, she saw him crest the top of a slide. We had one of those slides it was brand new equipment at the time. It was really cool stuff. And it was in the shape of a rocket. And so the kid had climbed up on the outside, on the other side of the rocket where she couldn't see him climb up. So she didn't know he was on top of the rocket until he already got to the top of the nose cone. And the nose cone is just a plastic kind of roof, so it was slippery a little bit. Lost his grip, fell and hit the ground. He might have fallen like maybe 8 or 9 feet. Hit the ground, landed on his back, knocked the wind out of himself. Okay, for being a knucklehead. I'm just going to call it what it is. Observation, I heard it. Question, what the heck was that? Research, it sounds like somebody like in football when I would hit somebody and knock them to the ground, or they would hit me and knock me to the ground. The thud that I heard that's in my research, my mental Rolodex there. Hypothesis, I think somebody fell because that body sound means somebody fell. Experiment, I turned around, I started collecting data, and I'm analyzing the data. Yep, I think he fell off the nose cone. Okay, I asked the student what happened. Student nodded yes and no to the different questions I was asking. So I got my data. My conclusion was the student fell off the top of the rocket, and then we probably should stand on both sides of the rocket next time, so that the kids don't end up doing it again. Yeah, that's what I would change about the experiment. So the data you collect and analyze, and then conclusion. The conclusion has more than one part. It's a paragraph. It's not just one sentence. Like, you have to answer whether the hypothesis is correct or not. Is the hypothesis right or wrong? What does the analysis tell you? Okay, well, you're analyzing the data and you're trying to figure out what patterns there are, some things you can measure. You're looking for all of that. And then at the end, all of the stuff that you measured and collected should tell you something about your theory. Is it going to improve your theory? Is it going to make your theory wrong? Or what is it going to do? You analyze data for that. What are you contributing to science that day by doing this experiment? And then how would you change your experiment? You're going to change your experiment by messing with variables. Maybe it didn't work. The hypothesis was wrong. So you have to go back to the drawing board, change something in the experiment so that your hypothesis, and you're not trying to make your hypothesis right. You're trying to see both how many wrong ways there are to get this experiment done and how many right ways there are to get this experiment done. And then that will change the way your hypothesis works. So you can make a new hypothesis every time. So once you observe, question, research hypothesis, then you do the experiment, collect the data, your conclusion says the hypothesis is wrong, you go back to the hypothesis part and you make a new hypothesis, and then you work the rest of 5, 6, and 7 out over again until you've come up with the hypothesis that not just fits what your theory is, but the experiment works the same way every time when you do that particular thing. So that's the scientific process. Now how do you guys do this in daily life? You guys do this in daily life all the time. If you've ever been to a magic show or had a magician come to a kid's party and the magician does a trick, and I've seen this works with real little kids. You go, okay, look, watch. You go, oh, wow. You do this little magic trick for them. And the first thing they do is they observe, they see it, and they go, oh, whoa, how'd you do that? That's the question. They saw what you did, they asked the question, and now they're trying to do it with their hands. They're doing their research, their own literature review, if you will. They're trying to figure out how to do it. They're moving their hands around and stuff like that, and trying to do the same thing you did. And so that's their research. The hypothesis is an educated guess. They're making a guess. I think this is how he did it, or I can't figure out how he did it. Then the experiment. They try the experiment, they collect the data, they do their conclusion, and either they couldn't figure out how to do it in their conclusion, or they did. They figured it out. So, there you go. That's the scientific process in a nutshell. And you do this all the time. You just don't really think you do. Think about the last time you were on the road, and I remember I was over by the mall on Perez Line Road, and I am over at the convenience store. It's like right there in the corner. There's like a four-way stop. There's an intersection, and I'm just there at the just barely walking out. I hear a screech. I hear and I hear crashing sound. I hear metal crunching. I hear glass breaking, and I heard it again. I didn't see it, but I heard it, and my brain automatically went into the mode and said, "Observation." Broken glass, crunching metal, screeching. And I'm like, wait a minute, what was that? So my brain automatically said, the screeching was tires, because you've heard that screeching tire sound before. Crunching metal and glass, because of course you've heard that before. Where you heard it before? I don't know, it depends. I've been to monster truck rallies where I've seen the guys that destroy trucks and shattering glass and windows and stuff like that. So I remember all those sounds from my experience. So that's my research. Observation, question, research. Then your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is an educated guess. That educated guess puts all that stuff together. I think a car just had an accident. So then you turn around to test your hypothesis with the experiment. Then you start collecting data when you're testing your experiment. You're like, okay, I do see a car. And I see the skid marks from the tires. And I see broken glass everywhere. And the front end of the car is all messed up. And the back end of a car hit was all messed up too. So then my conclusion was, yeah, my hypothesis is right. There was a car that had an accident. What does the analysis tell you? All of this stuff pointed to a car having an accident, and that's what they did. The person was at a red light. The person behind it didn't know that they had stopped at the red light and plowed right into the back of them. So the conclusion, it was, now how would I change the experiment? No, I didn't actually do this experiment, but the next time I hear it, I will have something to compare it to, because I've actually been a witness to an accident, even if I just heard it. So you do that all the time. Yeah, that was just something you would, somebody comes in the room and pops a balloon. I've done that before in classes to kind of like make it bell ringer. You come into the room and I have a balloon set up, and they walk in, they sit down, they're nice and calm and everything, and then pop, and then some of them jump and then they freak out. Oh, what was that? The first two steps of the scientific process: their observation, they heard it, question pops up. And someone said he must have popped a balloon. So they did the research in their brain to figure out that popping sound sounds like balloon popping, because we kind of know the sound. So again, like that said, they tested their hypothesis. What was that? I was like, well, the experiment. Well, they asked me a question. I told them. They saw what it was, so they collected their data and they drew the conclusion. Well, he popped a balloon. My hypothesis was right. The analysis told me that way, because I've heard balloons popping before. How would I change the experiment? Well, they're not really doing the experiment, but the next time they listen, they will know for sure that the balloon popping sound is that balloon. So the steps of the scientific process, you guys do them all the time, and you don't know that you're doing them. So these 7 steps are my logical thing, and they are totally in line with the posters that I just showed you. So I'm not doing anything extra other than saying that the research is important, and that it's more a literature review or an information review, if you're doing it in your head, of what you already know or your experience that you've had put together. Everything else is pretty much there: experiment, data, conclusion, analysis, observation, your question. All of those things are there. So the next time you're doing something and you catch yourself, think about the scientific process. You catch yourself doing it. You made an observation. You're working with something with your hands, and you're like, wait a minute, is this supposed to be like that? Your question, it doesn't matter what question it is, as long as it's a question that you can answer. And then you do this thing in your brain where you're trying to figure it out. You make a hypothesis, start doing it, get your data. You analyze it. Well, I guess I was wrong, or maybe I was right. And you got your conclusion. How would you change it next time? Well, instead of doing it this way, I would do it that way. Hypothesis was wrong, so I got to go back to the hypothesis, change it around a little bit, and then see what happens. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this little thing here. Let's see, what else did I have? Nope, that was pretty much it. I did figure out how to change some things in, let's see, right here. I have now a setup thing where I can just speak to you like I did before. I've got the little label thing going on. Got the little label thing going on between. And then I've got thank you for watching. So right now I'm going to end this video. I hope to see you soon. Make sure you're staying safe. Turn in your packets early so that I can get a chance to grade those 10 days worth of that. And then please go and log into Google Classroom. Start asking questions there, because I haven't seen questions pop up yet. So you can watch this video later. I'm going to add an assignment to Google Classroom, so you'll be able to go in there and answer questions about the video you've just seen. Make sure, if you like it, go ahead and I don't know, they say this on YouTube all the time: like and subscribe, leave some comments in the section below. Make sure they're clean, because these are going to be seen by your parents. And make sure that if you're coming to stream, you're not a student or a parent, but please leave positive comments. I don't mind criticism, but being negative and even a little bit obscene is not going to be useful on this YouTube channel. So thank you very much for watching. You guys have a nice day and stay safe.